took an axe, gave
No.
her husband 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave his girlfriend 40 whacks. Lucy Hardy took an axe, gave her husband 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave his girlfriend 40 whacks. Lucy Hardy took
Ikaga desu ka, Watanabe-dan desu. Today on Backward Engineering Your Script, we're going to talk about a very specific type of star vehicle. And that is a star vehicle that was written for actresses who, shall we say, have gotten a little bit older, so can no longer play ingenues or shop girls or romantic leads. And this has always been a problem for female stars as opposed to male stars. I know that we're often talking about fairness in Hollywood and how it's unfair that someone like George Clooney or Tom Cruise can play for 30 years the same role that they were playing when they were in their late 20s and early 30s. And for some reason, actresses cannot have careers of that longevity. Well, certainly actresses like Sigourney Weaver and Susan Sarandon and Meryl Streep and many others have belied that. But there's something very special that they must do that male actors don't have to do. And that is that every 5 to 7 years, they need to completely revamp their images and make them into something ever so slightly or oftentimes dramatically different. The film that we're going to look at today is Strait Jacket. Let's start with the number one area that is unusual about it, and perhaps this wasn't fully appreciated at the time it was made. Strait Jacket is a rural movie. And by rural movie, I'm not talking about it's happening among the gentry that happens to live in a rural area. No, this is about people who actually come from an impoverished background. We open on a scene that's very, very campy because of a lot of the elements in it, but is nonetheless a very brave scene for the film to have done. And that is Joan Crawford plays a 29-year-old woman who had been married to an older man primarily for his money, unabashedly so, who lives in a small town. She had now married a much younger man, played by Lee Majors, who, of course, would go on to the $6 Million Man, who obviously had married her for the same reason she had married her first husband, primarily for the money and for the land. He's cheating on her. She comes home and happens to catch him in flagrante delicto, and she exacts a grim revenge on him with an axe. Unfortunately, her daughter has witnessed it, and her daughter will grow up to become a villain herself. But we're not going to know that until the very end. That's going to be a surprise. Okay, for those of you who are upset that I just did a big spoiler, come on. This movie is 54 years old. So if you haven't seen it already, it's not going to be a surprise that you know the ending right now. But what's unusual about it is that we're seeing a different socioeconomic milieu. This is not happening among rich people. This is happening among people who are very reminiscent of who Joan Crawford was when she was born. Remember, she did not come from a big city and then come to, like Mae West. You know, I'm a girl from a big city coming to a little town. No. Joan Crawford was from a small town. She was dirt poor, and she made good, perhaps by not being the most moral person ever. And we saw that Lucy was not the most moral person ever. But her drive to get out of that grinding poverty was something Crawford herself had done. So Crawford related to the Lucy Harbin character on that level. But she could relate to that wanting something better, not only for herself, but for her daughter. Anyway, she spends 20 years in an asylum. And when she gets out, she's reunited with her daughter for the first time. Now, this is an unusual scene because in a movie that has an exploitative element, it's actually very touching emotionally. We see that the Diane Baker character, who plays her daughter grown up, is a little bit hesitant to greet her mother. This is not a necessarily completely warm reunion, which is completely against expectations. We're expecting a mother and daughter to have this wonderful reuniting, but we see that there's a hesitant on both parts, and we see that there's guilt on the mother's part. And this is where I feel that this movie goes beyond the base requirements of this genre, because more than just being a mystery, it's actually a social document. It's actually talking about how terrible it is to live in a rural area and feel that your life has no opportunities, that you are in effect stuck. We not only saw Lucy when she was young having to make this decision, but we see Carol doing it. Now, we're introduced to her boyfriend, and her boyfriend, very ineffectual. I mean, he's good looking. His character name is Michael, and I don't remember who the actor was who played him, but he's very, very nondescript. He's one of these good looking Hollywood guys who had a very brief career and then disappeared, and nobody ever noticed he was gone. But she's dating him. And we have no idea how she met him. We have no idea why he's even dating her, although we get a little bit of a suspicion of it. We know that his parents are not necessarily happy that he's dating this poor girl, and that he and Carol have done their best to keep from his parents the dirty little secret about what her mother had done. What this is telling us is that maybe Michael is not necessarily dating her for the right reasons. Yes, she has some artistic talent, and that might be interesting for someone like him, but for someone who is living in the plantation class amongst people who live in Riverside, certainly this is not the appropriate girl, and he knows his parents will object to it. But we get the sense that maybe the reason he's dating Carol is the same reason that Lucy's first husband went after her, and why Lucy went after Lee Majors. It's because there's something attractive when you're more wealthy about someone who is poor and desperate, and that there's that willingness to exploit it. And certainly, even though we get the sense that Carol has been well cared for by Lucy's brother and his wife as farmers, there's got to be something in her that is completely dissatisfied with her life. I mean, here she is having the artistic talent to craft a perfect sculpture of her mother from memory, and yet she's stuck with the prospect of being on a farm for the rest of her life. And we see very, very clearly who her option probably truly is. One of the supporting characters in the movie is played by George Kennedy. George Kennedy plays a handyman who at one point chops off a chicken's head. He's very greasy, he's very unattractive, he looks very much like Rod Steiger in Oklahoma. And this is the important part of his character, because in the same way that in Oklahoma, Shirley Jones' character cock teases the farmhand in order to make her boyfriend, who in modern parlance would be the equivalent of the football jock, the societally acceptable good young man. We see that in actuality, Judd in Oklahoma and Leo, played by George Kennedy in Strait Jacket, is very much more likely what Carol is going to end up with unless she's careful. And we see exactly how grotesque an option for her that must seem to be. And we know that probably somewhere along the line, her aunt and uncle have probably been pushing her towards this guy. So no wonder she wants to get away, and she will do anything in her power to make that happen. In her own way, Carol is very much the sister of Vita from Mildred Pierce, that the daughter who is ungrateful to all the things her mother has done. The difference between Lucy Harbin and Mildred Pierce, of course, is that Lucy has spent 20 years in an asylum, so she hasn't even had the opportunity to try to make her daughter's life better. So Lucy unlike Mildred, is completely powerless. She doesn't have her looks. She doesn't have anything that made her once appealing. And she knows she is a charity case for everyone. And I've got to tell you, this is where Joan Crawford's force of personality really comes into play. Because we see that in spite of the fact that she has less than nothing, in spite of the fact that there's certain parts of her personality that are as crude as Barbara Stanwyck in Stella Dallas, that she is not going to let that get her down. Sure, she has this very embarrassing moment when she meets Carol's boyfriend for the first time, after she's been made over by Carol, after she is given a new wig, after she's given some of the accoutrements of what made her attractive and a little bit trampy when she was younger, that she, because of the influence of a little bit of alcohol, has gone on and embarrassed both her daughter and her young man by flirting with him. She even puts her hands in his mouth in a seductive gesture that is cringy at the very least. But Crawford brings it off. You see that desperation that she has not had an attractive man interested in her in decades. And here is her daughter's young man, and she can't help herself. So as pathetic as it is, we're on her side. More importantly, after her embarrassment at having done that, she gets a chance to show us as viewers the old Joan in a scene with the boyfriend's parents, who the mother clearly has no intention of letting her son marry some farm tramp. Lucy acts in a form that's so powerful that when she confronts her, that she goes,
"My girl is going to have what she wants out of life. She is. I was cheated. But she's not going to be. Not my girl, not Carol. Carol and Michael are going to be married."
It's memorable, and we see that Joan, who in The Damned Don't Cry will pull herself from a very, very poor background and become not only a fashion model, but a gangster's model because her son died. Yes, this is the same woman. She is standing up to someone who has so much more social power than she does, and she does not hesitate a moment. This is role modeling. This is star making. And in spite of the fact that, yes, we do have axe murders, yes, we do have scenes that were, for 1964, very grotesque. We do have some cringeworthy moments. This is a performance that delivers in a way that very few of Crawford's earlier performance ever did. I mean, I put this right up there with Possessed and The Woman and The Damned Don't Cry as among the best of the Crawford performances, where she didn't have a great script to work with. It was all about her will to power. And this is why I believe that when Feud came out, it sided with Joan more than Bette, because Bette had talent. Joan didn't. Joan made it all happen because of her inner fortitude. And that is why Strait Jacket is the model for someone who is writing a film as a star vehicle for an older performer. No, the older performer does not have to be Geraldine Page in A Trip to Bountiful. The older performer can indeed be someone like Joan Crawford, who has that force of personality that makes even something as silly as her walking around with an axe worth it.